going to do a short video today just talking about vascular dementia. For some of you this might be quite painful or difficult to hear, so I'm just warning you now because I will be talking about my mother. I wanted to make this video, if anything, to raise awareness of vascular dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. because it's becoming so common now. The longer we're living, the more rife it's getting. I think someone's diagnosed every 3 minutes or something crazy like that with some form of dementia. I might be wrong with that statistic, so if anybody can correct me, feel free to do so below. But I know that it's very commonly diagnosed. And my mother, when she passed away in the summer, was 85. And she'd been suffering a long, long time. I knew things weren't right. They weren't right with my mum. I'd known it a long time, and there were things that just didn't add up. There were things she was doing, the way she was acting, quite a few years before she was actually diagnosed. And she would do things like she would hallucinate, and that was a key thing. For instance, she was convinced that people were out the front having sex in the field opposite. And she was looking through the front door, and I was looking with my dad, and we couldn't see anything, and we were literally there for about half an hour, and she was absolutely convinced that someone was out there, to the point where she got quite angry with us and quite agitated and said, "What's wrong with your eyes? What, can't you see what's going on out there? There's people having sex out there. Can't you see them?" And it was funny, but it was odd, and it was a little bit concerning. And there'd be other things as well. She liked to hoard a lot of things. And she would leave a lot of things on the stove, and then she'd put the stove on, and then there'd be a burning smell. Or she would leave things like cakes and still in their plastic wrapping that had been opened in the oven, and she'd turn the oven on. I mean, some things were... It's very difficult with dementia, because I think unless you've been through it yourself with a close relative, you can't really understand how that person is thinking and feeling. And there were things she would do. The other thing she did once was she put, what was it? Washing up liquid in the washing machine, and there was all these bubbles. And I said to Mum, "Did you put washing up liquid in the washing machine?" And she kind of went, "Yeah." Oh dear. And I mean, that was quite funny, but there were a lot of things that were amiss. She would get forgetful. She would, if we were walking along, she would go into a shop, and she'd just go into a shop. She wouldn't tell you. She would just disappear. And the amount of times I think either myself or my dad would phone up and say, "I've lost your mum." She couldn't work a mobile. She was a complete technophobe. She didn't like computers. So getting her to do a mobile wasn't going to happen. And also my auntie, who I think has just turned 90, has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And my poor mum, she was put into a care home in 2012, and she remained there up until her death. And I can't fault the care home. They were very, very good. But obviously it was getting harder and harder for me. Nobody else came to see her apart from Dad until he got ill, and I would go and see her, and obviously it was hard. It was really, really hard, because that person is there physically, but they're not there with their soul and their spirit, and they don't recognise you anymore. And that's a really hard thing. And although I could see that she was being looked after, for her to not recognise me, it was very hard. And I think it's harder for the people left behind, because they're seeing their loved one deteriorate. And I was heavily pregnant when I saw Mum last year, and she didn't recognise me anymore, and she didn't want to interact, and it was her first grandchild from me. And I just wish that more could be done. This is a really hard video, and I don't want to upset anyone, but I just feel that people should be made aware, because it's happening too much, and there's just not enough funding going into it. and with the crisis in social care as well. And part of me feels guilty that she was in care home, but she was happy and she was looked after. And I know it would have been really hard for me to cope, because there's things like she would wander, everything would have to be locked, and she'd be up all night, because when you have dementia, you can be quite active at night and at sunset as well. It's called sundowning apparently. And basically my mum's body shut down, her brain, it just slowly kills off the brain cells and shuts down your body. And she started falling over, she stopped speaking. At first it was sort of gobbledygook, and she stopped speaking, and she also fell in love with someone in the home and was like, he's my husband, we're married. And then she obviously had her falls, and then, or a fall, and the home were very good, they did tell me about that. And then she stopped walking, and then she became bedbound. And I think she went from the fall, January 2017, to being bedbound in the summer. And she just slowly just got smaller and smaller and more frailer. And the care home manager, who was lovely, said she's just like a little bird. And that was then I had to start thinking about funeral plans and everything. And I think it was doubly hard for me because I'd had Molly and I didn't have my mum around. I think what's even harder is that she was a children's nurse and she loved children, and she would have loved Molly. I was hoping I wouldn't get upset. Never mind. Even though I lost my mum a long time ago, to me it still feels very fresh. And I stupidly thought that I'd grieved for her, but it was like delayed grieving, and that I thought I wouldn't feel as upset as I do. And there's things I miss, like her sitting on the end of the bed talking to me, and her sense of humour. And when I eventually got the will and the funeral plans, I had a battle with that, which didn't help, because I didn't have any power of attorney or anything, but that goes when someone passes away anyway. And I found that she wanted to be buried in Sussex and things, where she grew up, where her book is based, which is what I've been working on, her memoirs, which I'm hoping to publish. And I felt like I hadn't got everything right for the funeral, because it wasn't as she wanted, and obviously being on the Isle of Wight, it just wasn't practical. Obviously being on the Isle of Wight, it wasn't practical. I couldn't go to Sussex. Nobody would be able to go and see her, because no one really lives there now. So I decided to do a little wake for her at the local pub, and I made sure that we had the biggest cakes that you could ever eat, like big cream cakes and sandwiches and tea, which she would have loved. She would have been in her element. So I hope that she can forgive me for that. But like I said, it's been hard to make this video, but I do feel that people should be more aware of this, and more needs to be done, and there needs to be much more funding. There just isn't enough, and this is not going to go away. It's not. And I know people like Joe Brand are supporting the cause, etc., to help, but more needs to be done. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. So I am a bit sorry that this is a really sad video, because that's not what I wanted. And sometimes I get really upset. It just takes me by surprise, and I was hoping I wouldn't be this upset. And I don't want to upset anyone, I really don't, so I apologise if I have. This is probably one of my most vulnerable videos. I'm not going to make many of these, because I don't want to be that kind of vlogger. But I just hope that this video is of some comfort or help to someone. And please, if you've got any questions, please comment below. just to say hi. If you need any advice, you need any help, there are organisations about, like obviously Alzheimer's UK. There are some Alzheimer's cafes where you can go if you're caring for someone that's got Alzheimer's dementia. And there are people to talk to. Not many, admittedly, here, but there are people like the Samaritans or anything. I'll put those links below if you're really struggling. And don't ever forget to ask if you find yourself in that situation and a dear relative or friend of yours has been diagnosed with it. Don't forget to ask the questions of the doctor. You're not silly, or the care staff, if you want to know stuff. And the other thing I must mention, actually, which is really, really important, is when people have dementia, they often go off in a dream world and they say silly things and they make things up. My mum was trying to get pregnant. So my mum was saying that she wanted to be pregnant. Then she was saying she was 19. And it's just easier to just go with that. Don't say, oh, actually, no, you're not 19, because it gets more agitated. Just play along with their little fairy world. At the end of the day, they're not physically suffering. They're in their own little dream world. If anything, I think the people surrounding that person are the ones that suffer the most. So I've not enjoyed making this video, but I just hope that I can reach out to some people, because it can be very lonely when you're in that situation and you don't know anyone else that's in that situation, that is watching a loved one basically going before their eyes. And a very long time. Mum was in the care home for 5.5 years. That is a long, long time. And it was very, very gradual. So, as I said, I will leave this now. I have said all I need to say. And thank you very much for watching. And if you want to see some more cheerier videos, then please subscribe. Thank you. I'm alright. I'm okay.